Yours, Houston Public Media, can start 2026 ready to serve all of Greater Houston. Make your impact today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate. Help keep local news and trusted reporting strong in Houston.
Your NPR station, News 88.7 KUHF Houston, a service of the University of Houston. Get local and breaking news anytime at houstonpublicmedia.org. Listen to us on your favorite devices. Tell your smart speaker to play News 88.7.
Welcome to the Best of Hello Houston. I'm executive producer Jim Kovacic, and I'm also your guide for today's show, featuring the best conversations and interviews from our show, Hello Houston. Coming up this hour, the Best of Hello Houston, Celeste Diaz-Sherman sits down for cold coffee with gun violence prevention activist Shannon Watts. Then Frank Billingsley talks with a friend of Frank, therapist Karen Winston, about her work counseling the Houston Texans. And finally, Ernie Manous talks with Broadway and TV star Sutton Foster. And just a quick reminder, you can always listen to our live Hello Houston show weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on News 88.7. You can also live stream the show at houstonpublicmedia.org.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
From NPR News in Washington, I'm Nora Robb. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's en route to Canada before his expected meeting tomorrow with President Trump in Florida. NPR's Joanna Kakissis reports from Kyiv. Despite the peace negotiations, Russia attacked the Ukrainian capital overnight, killing at least 2 people and injuring dozens.
Russia attacked Kyiv and surrounding areas with hypersonic, ballistic, and cruise missiles, as well as hundreds of strike drones. Speaking to reporters via voice message, Zelensky said Russia showed what it thinks of intensive efforts to end this war. They responded with a massive attack on Ukraine, he said. If the American side wants to hold a wartime referendum or elections, we cannot do it under conditions like these. Zelensky has said several times that he is ready to hold a referendum on the latest peace proposal if security is guaranteed for voters. Zelensky said that security guarantees are a main focus of talks with the Trump administration. Joanna Kakissis, NPR News, Kyiv.
Thailand and Cambodia have agreed to a ceasefire that could end 3 weeks of fighting that have killed more than 100 people. Michael Sullivan reports so far the ceasefire appears to be holding.
The ceasefire signed by the 2 countries' defense ministers says the 2 sides have agreed to halt their artillery attacks and rocket barrages for 3 days. The 2 countries have been involved in fierce combat for weeks that began in July, then reignited earlier this month. Hundreds of thousands on both sides have been displaced by the fighting. Whether the ceasefire holds is an open question.
Michael Sullivan reporting. The flight tracking site FlightAware says more than 1,200 flights were canceled today as a snowstorm in the upper Midwest and Northeast disrupts travel. Motorists could also face treacherous conditions. From member station WBUR in Boston, Rob Lane reports.
The storms will bring the first major snowfall of the year to some parts of the country. Mark Shieldrop of AAA Northeast says people should be careful on the road. He expects many drivers won't get a switch to winter tires and may be out of practice in terms of dealing with longer stopping distances.
They follow too closely, they're going too quickly, and unexpected things happen on the road, and you have to make an abrupt stop, and that's when bad things happen.
Shieldrop adds an extra word of caution that even on plowed roads, cold pavement can affect tire traction. For NPR News, I'm Rob Lane in Boston.
The Real-Time Crime Index, which analyzes crime data from hundreds of jurisdictions across the country, finds crime dropped across much of the U.S. this year. Both violent crimes and crimes against property. Murders were down about 20%. This is NPR News in Washington. In Syria, an ultra-conservative Sunni Muslim group is claiming responsibility for the bombing of a mosque during Friday prayers yesterday. At least 8 people were killed and 18 others were wounded. The Syrian Foreign Ministry denounced the explosion as a terrorist crime. China is gauging public reaction to potential new rules that would regulate the behavior of AI chatbots, banning obscenity and glamorizing suicide. NPR's Emily Fang reports.
These new rules up for public comment would ban any AI behaviors that manipulate humans and, quote, harm personal dignity and mental health. They would also ban gambling behavior, anything that abets crime, broadly speaking, and obtaining sensitive personal information. They'd also compel AI companies to train their chatbots and datasets that, quote, conform to the core socialist values and embody the exceptional traditional culture of the Chinese people. Strict rules already apply to humans on the internet. New guidelines published this week by China's Cyberspace Administration forbids influencers, for example, from acting lewd, vulgar, or promoting anti-mainstream values, including encouraging people not to work. Emily Fang, NPR News.
California is dropping a lawsuit against the federal government. The government had allocated $4 billion for a high-speed rail line between Los Angeles and San Francisco, but slashed it in July. The cost for the whole project is now more than $100 billion. California officials will now seek the money from other sources. I'm Nora Rahm, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs for use in restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com. This is NPR.
And now back to Hello Houston. Comment on any of today's topics. Call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's Ernie Manus, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
When you feel enraged about something that has happened or is happening in your world, your community, where do you turn? So many people say, turn off the news, go out and vote, run for office. But what if you just can't wait another minute? You just feel that burning inside of you. My next guest on today's episode of Cold Coffee found herself in that place December 14th, 2012. While being a stay-at-home mom of 5, she watched breaking news like the rest of us of 20 children and 6 educators who were gunned down in their classroom at Sandy Hook School in Newton, Connecticut. Shannon Watts is the founder and former president of Moms Demand Action and author of Fired Up, How to Turn Your Spark into a Flame and Come Alive at Any Age.
You know, I never imagined that I would end up being a gun safety advocate, but after the horrific shooting tragedy in Sandy Hook, Connecticut, I couldn't help but get off the sidelines. You know, after 20 children and 6 educators were slaughtered in the sanctity of an American elementary school. And sadly, that was just, one of many, including Uvalde, that would follow. But it is important to remember that we have made incredible progress in this country. I founded Moms Demand Action not to be anti-gun, but to just restore the responsibilities that should go along with gun rights. And we've passed 500 gun safety laws in the last decade. We've elected thousands of gun sense champions to office. And so it's really important to remember that, this work is difficult. You're going up against a very powerful special interest, but it is effective. And we all deserve to live in a country where gun violence is not the number one cause of death among children in America. We have to make it safer for everyone, for all families and for all communities. And that's what this day is really about.
And why do you feel like you were the one? What professional and personal skills did you have that suited you to be the one to pick up this torch? And not just pick up this torch, but be successful in your advocacy?
Well, to be clear, I knew little to nothing about gun violence, organizing, the legislative process. I was just a really angry mom living in Indiana at the time who kind of saw Mothers Against Drunk Driving as the prototype for how do women and moms rise up and take action, get off the sidelines, use their voices and their votes. I think in large part because I had been a communications executive for over a decade, I knew how to create a brand, to tell a story, to craft a message. And that was really important to make women feel empowered, to make them feel like they could stand up against a special interest. Thankfully, women, mostly women from across the country who had so many different skills, from legal skills to organizing skills to website development, all of it they brought to me and brought to the table, and really are the reason that Moms Demand Action has become the largest women-led nonprofit in the nation.
As the founder, where are you most effective in linking advocacy and policy to affect change?
Well, as I said, we have passed over 500 gun safety laws in this country, and that's in red and blue states alike. When we talk to Americans, we know that there's huge agreement and common ground on what will keep us safer. Things like background checks, secure gun storage, keeping guns out of the hands of domestic abusers. This is low-hanging fruit that we can all agree on as Americans, that we have to keep guns out of the hands of people who have dangerous histories. And so that's really where we've made so much progress in this country, in red and blue states alike. Sometimes you're playing defense and you're stopping bad bills from passing, but very often when you do the hard work, you end up being able to pass good gun laws that keep all Americans safer. And we're seeing that in the data. We're seeing gun violence in many ways decrease. That is a good sign, but there's still a long way to go.
And it's interesting that you say there's still a long way to go because, more than ever, grassroots advocacy is needed. But I think that many times people feel helpless and aren't sure exactly where to start. They know they want to do something, they're just not exactly sure how. And what is your advice to them? And I love that you talk about how you were a stay-at-home mom at the time. Because I think we so often look at the success mountain and we see everybody on the other side. We see the 10 million followers and the movement. But we didn't see that at that moment you weren't the executive when you started this. You were a stay-at-home mom. You didn't have the title. You were in your living room folding laundry as you watched breaking news happen. Like every other American, like so many moms that are at home right now watching the news and are saying, I would love to do something. They feel that fire that you're talking about. Where can people and women specifically start?
Well, that's exactly why I'm fired up, because I'm at a unicorn. All women in this country have skills to bring to the table, and it's really this formula that I have found, not just with myself, but kind of holding the hands of thousands of other women and walking them through that door, which is your abilities, your values, and your desires. And when those three things combine, and they're unique for each of us, I think it's like alcohol, right? And it helps you figure out the way forward, how you can get involved. Alice Walker, the poet author, has said that activism is a rent I pay to live on the planet. So it doesn't matter what issue is calling you or what speaks to you, and maybe it's not even politics, right? It may be professional, it may be personal, but we all have these unique abilities, values, and desires that we can bring to the table and affect change in some way. That may be just having the hard conversation you wanted to have in a long time, or maybe asking for a promotion, or maybe starting an organization. But given the state of the world right now, we need every woman to feel fired up. We need them to know what makes them come alive, and we need them to act on it.
And so I want to go back really quickly. So you started Mothers Demanding Action in 2012, and then you stepped back in 2023. Why did you take a step back in that moment?
I really believe that power should be finite. When I started Moms Demand Action, I thought, this is not going to be forever. There are other things I want to do with my life. I was 41 years old, but I thought I will do this as long as I need to. I was a full-time volunteer, ended up being for 11 years. And, for the first few years, the answer was obviously no, it's not time to step back. Then, as the years went on, it was maybe. And then finally, I was standing in the Rose Garden in 2022. President Biden was signing the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act into law. It was the first federal gun safety legislation passed in a generation. It was in large part because of the horrific shooting tragedy both in Uvalde and in Buffalo. And I just knew that was the bookend to my activism, that it was time to hand the torch over to another woman who would lead the organization, and that I had other things to do. I didn't realize that would be immediately starting to write a book, but I'm just incredibly grateful to be able to talk to other women about this idea of, we have so much life now. We don't have to disappear, when we turn 50, and we can start whole new chapters and burn until the very end of our lives. And so, I interview over 70 women for this book, and the stories of women becoming published authors and going back to law school and starting new companies all in the later halves of their lives. To me, that is incredibly inspirational, and it's what I want to keep doing.
I'm Celestia Sherman. You're listening to Cold Coffee on Hello Houston. Shannon Watts is the founder and former president of Moms Demand Action and author of Fired Up, How to Turn Your Spark into a Flame and Come Alive at Any Age. change. So did you find that this movement that you were a part of, you pivoted and decided to start mentoring women, you decided you were going to write this book. And in the book, you write, I was at a crossroads in my life, and no matter which direction I chose, there would be serious consequences. What crossroads were you at?
I think like so many women, I was living on autopilot. I was in a marriage that wasn't working for me. I was in a career I didn't love. And I just thought, I'm stuck here and I can't go after kind of what I thought the life I would be living was. And what I have learned in my career and my activism is that men are often taught to follow their desires and women are taught to fulfill their obligations. And we have to go through life asking ourselves, what do I want? I really want women to be thinking about that. And that becomes a practice. And when I put this formula into practice, as I said, values, abilities, and desires, it changed my life. I ended up leaving my marriage and, we ended up being great co-parents. I eventually found the love of my life. I founded Moms Demand Action. I got to work shoulder to shoulder with other women and really found my people and ultimately my fulfillment. And I have seen so many other women in Moms Demand Action do the same. And I think we just need to talk more about what is it like to live more bravely? What kind of blowback will you get and how do you navigate it? How do you get through the messy middle? There's so many times that I wanted to turn back.
Sure.
And then, how do you use that fire that you eventually start to find your people? And I just think that's another important part of midlife, which is having other women friends. And, I didn't find that out until I was in my 40s and even 50s. And it's changed my life for the better.
Totally. And you talked a little bit about setbacks and, what kind of setbacks and fears did you experience making that transition and going into this new space of mentoring women and working with women to find their passions and their fire, that perhaps maybe you had doubts? What did those look like to you?
There are common emotions that are triggered whenever you start to live differently, right? You may want to do less, you may want to do more, but ultimately, if you decide to do differently, you are going to have people who are questioning what you're doing. That may not be the blowback that I got. I started getting threats of death and sexual violence immediately when I started Moms Demand Action. But maybe, someone's going to make an offhand comment in the pickup line at your kid's school about the fact that you missed a soccer game because you weren't pursuing what you wanted. And when you have those feelings of guilt and shame, those lead to imposter syndrome and perfectionism and wanting to disappear, all these very common kind of archetypes that women experience. And so I name all of those in the book. And, when you live audaciously, the blowback is predictable, but it is not personal. And I do ultimately think your ability to live audaciously, your ability to grow your fire is directly proportional to how much blowback you can withstand. And this is in many ways a handbook that says this is the kind of blowback you're going to get. Here's how you handle it. Here's how you get through it. I talk to women so often who feel like they're held to this incredibly high standard. And maybe society is doing that, maybe they're doing that to themselves. But if we continue to kind of fall back in those patterns, we never move forward.
And it's interesting, the title of the book is Fired Up. Why fire?
It's funny, I had all of these self-help books that I thought were so interesting, and I brought them to my friend's house who's an author, and she said, these are great, but they're not very interesting. You are a fiery personality.
Yes.
And when she said fire, that just really spoke to me. I mean, it is a metaphor. Living on fire is this idea of, figuring out two things: what's holding you back and what's calling you. And then deciding to move forward with either removing the things that in your life that are holding you back and really following those things that are calling you.
And you talked a little bit about these key components, women's values, and there's three key components to this. Walk me through those three key components, and how can a woman find her own values, her ethos?
Well, your values are going to change throughout your life. When I started Moms Demand Action, my values were protecting my family and community. I'm an empty nester now, so my values are different. And so really taking stock of who am I, what is meaningful to me, and what are my values right now in my life. then your abilities, right? Those can be innate, they can be acquired, and I think it's important. There are a lot of exercises in the book that help you realize what your abilities are. So often we don't know. And I think as women, we underplay our abilities. And so asking other people what they see our abilities, and then deciding, okay, maybe there's some skills I need to acquire to eventually go after what I want. And then finally, desires, right? The desires are things that are inside you that you want to explore before the end of your life. And I think sometimes we think life is infinite, and when we start to realize that maybe the obligations or the shoulds in our life are overtaking the desires. When I talk to these 70 different women for my book, so often when I ask them what they're afraid their deathbed regret will be, it's that they didn't live a life that was authentic or true to them. And I don't want any woman to get to the end of their lives and feel like they didn't burn. So when you have your values, your abilities, and desires, they come together. This is the formula for living on fire. You're going to have to keep practicing it, right? Just like starting a fire. It doesn't happen always the first time you try. And you put it into practice, and eventually you will. And it is often when you get that perfect combination, it is like touching the divine. And that's what it was like for starting Moms Demand Action.
I'm Celestia Sherman. You're listening to Cold Coffee on Hello Houston. Shannon Watts is the founder and former president of Moms Demand Action and author of Fired Up, How to Turn Your Spark into a Flame and Come Alive at Any Age. I found this also so interesting. You write that purpose is often mistaken with other qualities like passion and happiness. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I talk about what are false fires in my book. Often purpose, we're told we're put on this earth to do one very specific thing, and if we don't accomplish that somehow our lives are a failure. I think we need to decide, are we living for a purpose or are we living on purpose? And that in my mind isn't purpose, it's fulfillment. The other false fire is often happiness, this idea that we're always trying to be happy and achieve that. I think that is mistaking an obligation for a fire. And then finally, busyness. And I know I'm guilty of this as much as anyone. This idea if we're just busy and productive, that is somehow finding fulfillment. And I don't think any of those things are true. I think it's what we're sold to keep focusing on our obligations. I mean, imagine if women lived their lives asking themselves, what do I want? Governments would topple, institutions would fail, family systems would fall apart. And so we have to remember that we are in charge of deciding, if our lives are authentic and audacious to us.
What myths about success, achievement, and happiness do you hope to debunk in this book?
I think women, again, start to often mistake their obligations for their desires. And they get to the end of their lives and realize, that they didn't end up being able to pursue the desires that they had in their heart. Another interesting conversation I had with women for this book was they have a great fear, almost all of them who are mothers, that if they pursue something that's important to them, it will be at the expense of their children. And, this is a myth that we perpetuate to make women feel guilt or to feel shame. I now have adult children. I'm on the other side of that chasm. And I can promise you that none of them say to me, I can't believe you didn't go to that soccer game in 2006.
Yeah.
What they often say to me is two things. One, I'm so glad you had something to focus on other than just me. That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And two, thank you for showing me by example that I can pursue my desires as an adult. And I tell so many stories in the book that illustrate this idea that it's important for us, yes, as parents to play the role and invest in the role of being a mother, but it's also important for us to invest in the other things that we care about.
Absolutely. And now I have to ask you, talked about how. So how is Fired Up different from other empowering, books or self-help books? What is different about this book when a woman picks it up?
Well, these are stories of the women from all walks of life. And, I wrote this book because Moms Demand Action didn't just transform the issue of gun safety, it transformed thousands and thousands of women as activists, because when they realized their abilities, their desires, their values, they became different people. Maybe they extracted themselves from a difficult relationship. Maybe they decided to go back to school. Maybe they started their own organization. Maybe they asked for promotion. I saw this over and over again, that when they practice this formula for living on fire, they came alive. And so Moms Demand Action actually also became the world's largest real-life laboratory for women figuring out how to come alive. And so these stories and this information and this formula are transformative. And I think that we are finally, especially Gen X, having these conversations. They've been whisper campaigns for so long, but now we're talking out in the open about how do we live the second half of our lives.
What is one key takeaway that you hope when a woman picks this book up, they will have?
That living on fire, that asking yourself what I want, what do I want, is really a practice, and it's a discipline, and it's an exercise. And this book walks women through exactly how to figure out their values, their abilities, and their desires, then to practice starting these fires in their lives, and to bring them together with other women to help them do that in the safety of a community that supports them. I have learned so much through working with women throughout my career and through my activism, and I know that this formula changes lives. And you are not too old. It is not too late. Any time in your life, it is completely acceptable, and you will have success when you start practicing living on fire.
Shannon Watts is the founder and former president of Moms Demand Action, author of Fired Up, How to Turn Your Spark into a Flame and Come Alive at Any Age. Shannon, thank you so much for joining me today on Cold Coffee.
Thank you so much for having me.
The Best of Hello Houston on News 88.7. I'm Jim Kovacic, the executive producer of the show. And just a quick reminder, you can listen to our live Hello Houston show weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on News 88.7. You can also live stream the show at HoustonPublicMedia.org. If you have any comments about Hello Houston or this Best of program, please text us at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@HelloHouston.org. Coming up on the Best of Hello Houston, Frank Billingsley talks with a friend of Frank, therapist Karen Winston, about her work counseling the Houston Texans. This is News 88.7.
Your support for Houston Public Media powers the programs you trust and rely on. And your employer may help your contribution go even further. Many employers sponsor matching gift programs, doubling or even tripling employee contributions. It's an easy way to maximize your impact on the programs you rely on. Search for your company and get started today at HoustonPublicMedia.org/match.
I'm Jesse Thorne. You want some real, insightful conversations about where art comes from? Well, Bullseye has you covered, as long as you don't mind a little bit of ridiculousness.
Y'all was like really judging me though.
They sniffed it out. They sniffed out that I was weird.
I was like, I don't know where I'm gonna sit, just like in the movies.
Listen, learn, laugh. Bullseye for maximum fun and NPR.
Bullseye, Thursdays at 9 p.m. on News 88.7.
Comment in on any of today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's Celestia Sherman and Frank Billingsley.
In today's Friends of Frank, my good friend Karen Winston is back. She's a licensed master social worker, a clinical assistant professor at Baylor College of Medicine, and former psychotherapist to the Houston Texans. Those young men are under a mountain of stress and face new challenges each season. Here to talk about that is my friend Karen Winston. All right, another edition of Friend of Frank, and I'm with Karen Winston, a real friend of Frank for a long time. And this time, I want to talk to Karen about one of the roles she had for 13 years, which was the team counselor for the Texans. Now, is that like a life coach, Karen? Is that what is a team?
Life coaches usually aren't licensed, so I would say no.
So but you have a psychologist degree?
I have a degree in social work from the University of Houston.
Okay.
Master's in social work.
And you also work at Baylor College of Medicine?
I'm a professor at Baylor College of Medicine.
So you walk the walk?
I walked the walk.
You got the receipts.
Got the receipts and have the license, which is important to have a license because it really informs you how to be ethically.
I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this, but how did you become a team counselor for the Texans?
So a colleague of mine was working with the Astros, and the Texans called the Astros and said, hey, is your guy available for us also? And he said, no, I can't take on 2 teams, but I know the exact right person. And the reason he knew that is because he knew he had referred professional athletes to me, and he knew I was very comfortable with working with professional athletes. So that's how it happened.
And so why did the Texans feel that they needed a team counselor?
Well, the NFL mandated initially that every single team had a licensed therapist to teach the rookies as they came in to help them navigate this huge new role they had in the NFL. And so I was chosen to do that. So I was actually paid by the NFL for my first, 5 years, 4 years. And then the Texans decided to hire me because the NFL was really saying every team needs a therapist. And there was a lot of pushback from teams for many years, like, we don't need this. And then once I was there, and I was already there because I was teaching all the rookies every year, it worked beautifully. I mean, it was a very natural progression, and I had very little pushback at the beginning once they hired me, and it turned into a great relationship.
So it would be obvious that kids, and I say kids because they're 2021 coming into this.
The rookies are.
Yeah. Into this environment. First of all, there's going to be the stress and the pressure of being a professional athlete. That's got to be enormous. But what else? I mean, they come into a lot of money and all that goes with that. Maybe a lot of family pressure. What kind of challenges do these kids face?
Yeah. First of all, one size doesn't fit all. Yes, it's a lot of money from where their peers are. But from the practice squad to the number 1 draft pick, there's a huge variance in the kind of money they make. I think there's so many stressors, but one that's going on right now, as we're here in the summer and fall talking about football. When the roster goes from 90 that are in training camp to 53, all the guys are going to get cut that don't make the 53 roster. And then what happens to them? They're trying so hard. And then on the day they go to the 53-man roster and all those guys are cut, from every team, it's the same thing. They're scrambling to try to get into the NFL or stay. Well, then guess what? So, Frank, you made the 53-man roster. This is a Tuesday. You are high-fiving. You're going out to dinner with your friends and family. You went, oh, my God, I made it to the NFL, or I get to keep my job. You come in the next day, they go, Frank, you're out. You went, wait. You just picked me yesterday. Go, sorry, we changed our mind. We got someone else today. Someone got released on another team. We want them. So then you don't have a job. So then what happens? Cincinnati calls you, the Bengals. You go, we want you up here, Frank. You go up there. You're there 2 weeks. Your family's still here. You're going, oh, maybe I'll move there. They release you. They go, Frank, sorry, we're bringing someone else in. You come back to Houston. Texans call you. They say, Frank, we really like you. We're putting you on the practice squad. You're not going to suit up for games, but you're going to practice with us. You're kind of the men in waiting, right? Oh, my God, I got to salary him in the practice squad. Well, the practice squad works like this. Any team can steal you, but your team gets the choice of moving you to the big roster or letting you go. You could move in one season 8 times easily. Your family, if you're married or with kids or own a house, you don't know where you're going to be in those first 4 years. It can happen all the time. It can happen to guys under contract too. But when you have a guaranteed contract like in Houston, the number 1 and number 2 draft picks, otherwise, you don't know. It is the most unstable business and unpredictable and difficult, and the stress is unimaginable. I have such high regard for these men, what they go through. Not to mention what you said, family wanting money. Oh, now you're rich. Are girls going after you for your money, for who you are? 1,000%. You don't know who's real, who's not, who really cares about you, who doesn't.
I had no idea. And you're talking about the first 4 years. This isn't just the first year.
Because it's not guaranteed. Your contract is not guaranteed. You get guaranteed money, but your contract is not guaranteed.
All right, so you go into a classroom with these young men who are facing all of this.
Uh-huh.
And what do you write on the blackboard? What in the world do you tell them?
Well, first of all, no blackboard. Everything we talk about is confidential. Number one rule. They can say what's going on in the classroom with themselves, but no one else. So we have to have a safe place, most important. And I have the NFL gave us a curriculum, but we talk about money, financial education. We talk about emotional intelligence. We talk about healthy and unhealthy relationships. And, now I'm no longer at the Texans. I was there 13 years, but I'm 17 years of working with athletes of all different areas. And I can tell you stories that you just can't imagine how targeted these guys get by people. And how my job in the classroom was to help them know some of these stories and to have their eyes wide open.
Before something bad happens to them.
Yes. And I cannot tell you how many of my former players either call me, still see me, I run into, will say, okay, Karen, so I got in the class and I was so bummed I had to spend an hour in a classroom because they're tired by the time they got to my classroom in the afternoon. And they go, and you gave us examples of things that could happen in families when you get money. And I sat there and said, not my family. And he goes, I've had two guys tell me this. It happened exactly as you said it in my family. I couldn't believe it. I just knew it would never happen. Meaning family becoming gold diggers, having high expectations, big pressure, people you've never met coming out of the closet.
And this is just, my question is, do you talk to them about how to handle the public? Because I've been in elevators with a number of athletes around Houston. There are a lot of athletes around Houston. Occasionally you run into them. Yeah. And they're casually, like Jose Altuve, very friendly, very nice. Will take a quick selfie in public. But if you get on an elevator with them, they're very quiet. It's almost like they are told, love your public, be polite, but not sincere.
No one tells them that.
You know what I mean?
No.
It's like, be guarded.
Well, everyone's got a personality, and you've got a very outgoing personality. So you're a public figure. If you're on an elevator, you're probably going to say hi to anyone that talks to you. But if you're not outgoing, if you're more introverted, or more socially kind of like unsure of yourself, that would make sense because you're in a box.
Yeah.
But when you see these guys at training camp, most of them will go sign autographs, but not everybody, because everyone's different. And as you become known as an Astro, a Rocket, a Texan, people want something from you. Could be an autograph, but they want to tell you who they know, or they want to critique your job, Frank. I can't tell you how hard it is for these men. Think about this. You've been on TV. If you get on social media, you probably saw people critique you doing the weather or Hello Houston. Well, every Sunday, people critique their job.
Sure.
You understand? We don't go through that, those of us that aren't like you and the Texans. But these young men are busting their guts.
Their helmets.
Their helmets to do the best they can. And people have the audacity to put them down and, try to tell them what they're doing right or wrong. Now, they can say, gosh, I wish you would have, tackled better. Or, I know you're working on it. But no, it's none of that. It's, name calling and ugliness. And then there's the women trying to get favors from them, trying to date them. And there's women that are trying to get pregnant by them. So they have a paycheck.
What is the number one pitfall that they'll almost always fall into if someone like you doesn't warn them?
The number one, you mean what could be dangerous to them?
Well,
what
yeah.
could be
What's the stumbling block? The first stumbling block. I've got money. I've got a big job. I'm a pro athlete.
That's the stumbling block. I have money and I have a job. NFL, not for long.
Right. You think that it's
That's
there.
the stumbling block. I mean, you look at some very famous players that had guaranteed contracts, and it didn't go well for them. They got a little big for themselves. And I think that anyone without a guaranteed contract has to be careful. And with a guaranteed contract, you have to be careful about your behavior, your conversation. You represent your city, your team, your family, your state, and the NFL. You are a representative. And it's like you being here representing NPR. That's who you represent. And I think that these young men have to really pay attention to behavior and watching who they walk with, who their crew is, who their homeboys are. Because you have these homeboys that are not healthy. You get in the NFL, the homeboys know you have money, you're running with them, and you're getting arrested. It happens every year to these young men because they go, oh, but they're my homeboys. I knew them. They were great.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but they're carrying weapons or they're doing something illegal and you're riding with them. That's a pitfall. You've got to really adjust. What's my focus? What are my morals? What are my ethics? Who do I walk with?
You're really the den mother.
Yes. I love being their den mother. I think these men are amazing. I truly admire them. And it was just so much of a pleasure to work with these men.
I guess now all teams have some sort of counselor.
They do.
Have you written the book yet?
Nope. I've given the speeches, though, like I'm doing here. I love to talk to groups about my topic is what's really going on the inside of the NFL.
And so now that they're getting back on the field, what have they been doing all summer?
Relaxing and working out.
So that's sort of their life.
Well, if you don't work out in the summer, you might not make the team. When you get in 100-degree heat and you've got pads on, coaches know immediately who's not been working out.
Do they go with a playbook of workouts, like here's what you're expected to do every day? Or do they just say, work out all summer, we'll see you in the fall?
Work out all summer, but they've been, if they've been in college, they have their college routine. Every team has professional trainers, so they know what they've been doing. Some guys get together. Some guys from different teams get together and work out. Like they'll go somewhere and work out for the summer or for a few weeks or a month. So these are professionals. And if you have a professional mentality, you're making sure you have vacation, you're resting your body, and you're keeping it in shape, you're eating well. You know, this is really important. I mean, you don't have long to be in this profession.
True.
Yeah. I mean,
that's why it pays well up
you're
front.
lucky if you make it 3 years. You're really lucky.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you ever taken a life lesson from them?
Oh, 1,000. I mean, yes. First of all, their ability to handle the stress has helped me so much because I watch, you know, can you imagine you've got a locker in the locker room, you've made it to the NFL, and you've watched 8 men come in and out to the locker next to you. How do you manage that fear? How do you manage when you want something so bad and it may not happen for you? We've all felt that, I think. I speak for myself. But many of us have felt like we wanted something so bad. And it just didn't happen. And how do you manage that grief, that loss, that expectation. And I watch these young men manage. Oh my goodness. They're amazing. They're just amazing.
Wow. So, who's your favorite team?
Gosh, Frank, that's a hard question. Can I get back to you? Listen, I think the Texans are on the right track right now. They're doing a great job. They have a tremendous head coach and general manager, and Cal and Hannah are really being thoughtful about how they think about this $6 billion company holistically. And I say it that way because they've really beefed up the mental health part of this business, and I'm really proud of them. I think it's amazing what they're doing.
Well, go Texans. Yeah. All right, Karen Winston, thank you for being a friend of Frank.
I love you.
I love you too. Thank you so much. All right, that was Karen Winston, a licensed master social worker, a clinical assistant.